Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a safe place for leading with your heart. Hey, thanks for being here. You, Me, Empathy is the official podcast of the Feely Human Collective, a collaborative mental health community designed to empower each of us to grow our capacity for empathy, vulnerability, and emotional wayfinding. Just a friendly reminder that this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. No one is just a silly boy with a feely heart. You can support the show by leaving a review in Apple Podcasts, following us on social media at Yumi Empathy and Feely Human, and joining the Feely Human Collective community at feelyhuman.co. And now your host, Known Wells.
Hello, Feely Humans. Welcome to another episode of You, Me, Empathy. My name is Known Wells, and I've had a headache for about 2 months. Truly. I don't know what's going on. I think it's sinus stuff. I'm telling myself it's not a tumor. It's not. It's my sinuses and my allergies, and it's just annoying. Anyways, hi, how are you? I'm the founder of the Feely Human Collective, which you can learn more about at feelyhuman.co. This is episode 224 with my guest, Rob Volpe. We talk about why empathy is radical. We talk about the change that can happen one conversation at a time, what empathy at work looks like, dismantling judgment in our hearts, and so much more. Rob has written a book called Tell Me More About That, and it's a deep dive into empathy. It's really wonderful. Really loved this conversation. We really get into the nitty-gritty of what empathy is. And empathy is messy. Empathy is uncomfortable. Empathy is ongoing and active and brings up a lot of the messy nuance that we as humans, I feel, need to get used to occupying that space. Mentally, emotionally, physically, we need to get used to the discomfort of that messy, mushy nuance that happens in empathy, and that happens in when we explore our bias and our assumptions, etc. So really loved this conversation. Really appreciate Rob for being on the show and writing this book, Tell Me More About That, which you should order. Links in the show notes at feelyhuman.co. Couple of things I want to mention before we get to the episode. It's a little over a week left, I think, maybe a week left in the pre-order for Dear Childhood Me, my journal, which I've sold at this point over 100 of them, which feels very exciting. That was, I think, my small little goal I had. So I reached that. That feels good. And I want to sell more. Because I think truly in my heart, this little journal, Dear Childhood Me, is a beautiful reminder for the empathy and compassion and looking back that we need to do in our mental health and our self-care journeys and our self-love journeys and our self-awareness journeys. So if you haven't yet ordered a journal, or if you want to send it to a friend, please do that. Like maybe send an email this week. That's my challenge to you. Send an email this week with a link, dearchildhoodme.com, and write about like why you ordered it. Send it to a friend. Send it to a family member. Someone you think that would benefit from a journal like that, and email some folks or share it on social media. Really, the marketing of a thing like this when it's just me is you all. And so I appreciate all of your support in sharing about it. If you haven't yet figured out what it is, go to dearchildhoodme.com and check it out. It means a lot to me. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I've been thinking about this show and this podcast and what it means to me. I've been doing it for over 4 years. And as you can see, this is episode 224. Been doing it for a while. I still love it. It still means the world to me. And I have been feeling like I want to change it. I've been wanting to do something different. And I don't know what that looks like. And so if you have ideas, I would love to hear them, truly. You can email me, youmeempathy@gmail.com or whatever. But I don't know. I still love having conversation. In fact, I loved this conversation with Rob, and I love all of my conversations. They're all very fruitful, and I learn so much. And it's the stuff that, I said at the top, change happens one conversation at a time. And I truly believe that. And I don't know, I've been feeling like I want to change, and maybe that's the growth that I'm experiencing. Maybe that it's feeling, not stale is not the right word, but it's feeling, I just want to, I want to kind of change. I'm just blathering, but I want to change something. So I don't know what that looks like. Maybe it's a deep dive into specific topics with experts. That feels like a lot more work on my part, but I don't know. If you have any ideas, if something feels good, just email me, youmeempathy@gmail.com. Okay, let's get into the episode. Go to dearchildhoodme.com, go to feelyhuman.co, subscribe, rate, review this podcast. Please, please, please. That really does help out the show. It's a very simple, free way to support me and the work I do. I'm also on Patreon, patreon.com/feelyhuman. $5 a month gives you a bonus episode every month with some other stuff. Any hoozles, let's get to the episode. This is episode 224 on why empathy is radical with Rob Volpe.
La la la, you, me, empathy, yeah, la la la.
Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, the official podcast of the Feely Human Collective. On this show, we explore the struggles, the triumphs, the brights and the darks we face as humans, trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of You, Me, Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our mental health, our neuroses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being feely humans. You, Me, Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today, I'm in a happy empathy sandwich because I'm here with CEO of Ignite 360, author of Tell Me More About That, and empathy activist. It's Rob Volpe. Hello, Rob.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness, so happy to have you. It's been a long time coming. I know I had had to reschedule this at one point, but I'm glad we're here. We're doing it. We're together in the empathy sandwich together.
Absolutely. And, there's no rushing divine timing. It all works out when it's supposed to happen. So I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you. First question I have for you. How are you feeling?
How am I feeling? I suppose the surface answer would be I'm good. Things are great. Book just came out a month ago and it's doing well. I've gotten some really great positive feedback on it.
Amazing.
But it's a full-time job to promote a book. And as you mentioned in the intro, I'm also the CEO of this kick-ass marketing research firm. So there's a lot of demand on my time, trying to manage that. And, there's like the world's kind of, in flames. And, I'd be lying if I said Ukraine doesn't weigh on my mind, and everything happening there. So how am I feeling? I think I'm feeling good, but I do have some, anxiety about the state of the world we're living in.
I empathize with that very, very much. How do you sort of manage or reconcile, maybe reconcile is not the right word, but kind of pair in your heart and in your head the good stuff, the good stuff that's happening with your book, and you're promoting it, and that's exciting, and you wrote a book, and that's amazing. And, the horrors that are happening in war, and, anti-trans bills across the country. And like, how do you personally like hold those truths and honor both those things in your heart?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, with the book itself, I've really tried to focus on the journey, like I do with most things in life, and not get hung up on like an agenda, I suppose. So it's less about the numbers and more about the conversations. And so, the subtitle of the book is Solving the Empathy Crisis, One Conversation at a Time. And I was in a session, I see an intuitive healer here in the Bay Area every so often. And I had a session with her a couple months ago, and she was, reiterating to me, like, you don't get hung up on the numbers, ride the currents of the river, let all of this happen. And I was like, oh yeah, it is one conversation at a time. It's the subtitle of my book. It stares at me, every time I look at the book. And so what I'm trying to focus on is one conversation at a time, and recognizing every connection that I'm able to make, whether it's truly an individual conversation or it's one like we're having, which will then get magnified and amplified because of your audience and the people that are tuning in. They're hearing that, and they're going to hear, in this case, some things about empathy and the way that I think about it and approach it. And it helps them reflect on their own lives, and that each conversation is then making the world a better place. And so I know that, that truth, that kind of mission in my life is now come out. I've birthed it, I suppose you would say. And so it's out in the world for people to start to engage with. And it can be a counterpoint to all the bad things that are going on. And it is, if people were to come at it from a place of empathy, it would solve, and empathy is about understanding other people, whether on an emotional level or a cognitive perspective level. You could avert a lot of the issues that we have if people would come together and talk things out from an empathetic place. Yeah. So I try to see what I'm doing as a counter to all of the awful things that are going on and the hate that's sort of out there. I did my very first in-person reading a couple of weeks ago in Vallejo, which is a smaller suburb of the Bay Area. And we were able to arrange for the local paper to cover the event. And they wrote about it ahead of time. And it was the event was on a Sunday, and they put the event above the fold on the front page. And it was actually above Russia and Ukraine and what was going on. And I absolutely loved that. It was a little weird at first, but I was like, no, this is an example of like good triumphing over evil. Like there's a positive message that's getting out there over the negative stuff that's there. I'm just looking to see if I've got a photo of it I can show you. So it's like the Vallejo Times Herald. Yeah. And, there it is. I'm sharing empathy. And then like the Russia stuff is down there below. And that is what I see ultimately and hope that we're headed towards, is that things like empathy and the positive connection that we can all have is going to triumph over the shadow and the darkness that's out there.
I love that. It's something I say on this podcast all day, every day, which is one heart at a time.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you can relate to this, but I as a helper type person, I can get overwhelmed easily, I can take it too far in my imagination, right? Even in my empathy, I could take it too far, right? So, being aware of my boundaries with it, being aware of my usefulness, right, is crucial part of it. And one way I do that, is having conversations. Certainly, the other piece of it, I wonder if you've thought about is, I'm sure you have. What you're saying is partially understanding and accepting what you can do, what you physically, individually can do with your with your heart, with your head, with the time, with your energy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's figuring out and understanding how we can show up and what the best way is that we can show up. And as you mentioned, I call myself an empathy activist. And, I love the tension in those two words because you don't necessarily think of empathy and activism going together. But to me, activism.
I do actually, and have for a long time.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I encourage other people to do that. And I encourage other people to use that term. I do not own it.
Empathy is radical.
It is. It absolutely is.
And it's hard. And it's ongoing and it's active and it like brings up a great deal of discomfort if you're doing it.
Yeah. It is not easy at all. And so I think about, you don't have to necessarily, it doesn't mean that I'm marching in the streets necessarily, but it does mean that I'm showing up with empathy in my engagement. So one heart to another, one conversation at a time, the messages that I'm trying to put out. And yeah, it is understanding like, what can I do? And if each one of us just does that, is more empathetic in one conversation, in one interaction, whether it's with the clerk at the grocery store, or it's with a loved one, or it's with somebody that you've been in conflict with, you can change so many things around from that because it is, the pebble thrown into the pond and the ripples effect that can have. And okay, you've created a positive experience with this other person. What are they going to go on and do? How is that going to change their perspective or their day? And therefore they're going to be better and better. And so on and so on. And it just continues to carry on from there.
I love the idea. And I think what I've seen and sort of talking about empathy the past 4 or 5 years and leading empathy workshops and doing stuff like that. Empathy is a very effective and useful and powerful tool, right? And it's also something that I think is, like a lot of things in life, perceived in a one-dimensional way and then taken for granted, right?
Yep.
So to use the example of like, the checkout person at the grocery store, right? There's a lot that can happen internally before even that conversation happens, right? Can you talk a little bit about that work, the internal stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, ultimately, that's what my book is all about, is the 5 steps to empathy, because I remember when the University of Michigan came out with a study of studies and 40% decline in empathy among college students, starting in 2001 compared to previous decades, and it never really moved from there. It never rebounded, and we see it playing out now. And when that came out, there was some outcry of like, oh, we need to be more empathetic, but nobody was really explaining how to do it. They were saying like, oh, you need to go to the restaurants or watch the news, sources that the other people do, or listen to their music. And it's like, well, yeah, but if you have judgment when you're going into that, you're never going to be able to get to a place of asking questions or actively listening. You're never going to get to empathy. And what I found was no one was explaining how to do it. And in a way that was, understandable and relatable, because to your point, yeah, people are afraid of empathy. When I give talks on empathy, I often have an image that I show of people in a movie theater watching what must be a horror film. They have this really scared reaction. And I'm like, and the title that I have on the card says, it's the E word people are afraid of. And it's like emotion. And a lot of people are afraid of emotion, and they're afraid of empathy because they think that empathy is always emotional, or that I have to give up my point of view to see somebody else's point of view. And it's like, no, that's not the case. But then, so in that, how do you do it? How do you get there? What we've found, so we identified these 5 steps, and that's what I write about. And I use my own stories, and I get pretty vulnerable and open and honest about my own experiences to help people understand the steps and give them the opportunity to reflect on how it shows up in their own life and their own behaviors, so that they can make a choice to do differently. But yeah, the 5 steps, it starts with dismantling judgment. If you can't get beyond that brick wall or those noise canceling headphones that you've got on, you're never going to hear or connect with somebody else. And then you have to ask good questions. You've got to be open and exploratory in the way that you're talking with people and framing things up where somebody can respond in a way that is going to be true for them and take you where they are, rather than them, affirming your biases and whatever agenda you might have. Third step is then active listening. And that's all about that being present and really listening and using your senses, not just your ears, but, what are you intuiting? What are you seeing? What are you smelling if you're physically in the room in the same space? And then finally, integrating into understanding is the fourth step. And so that is that, like, hey, make room in your head. It doesn't mean you have to give up your own point of view, but just make room in your head that, like, you like chocolate ice cream, somebody else might like vanilla, and that's okay. And that you want to be curious about that perspective and integrate that so that you can finally, in step 5, what I call use solution imagination, which is stepping into the shoes, imagining what it might be like to be that other person, or as you're engaging with them, ask questions and continue the engagement from that place of empathy. And where all of that can go.
I love that. It's funny. I appreciate that you're writing about empathy and talking about it. And then there's a part of me that's like, how dare he try to put it in 5 steps? Like that's capitalism. That's the system at work. But I get it. Like that's how we learn, and that's like a framework, I guess a framework with how we learn. And in addition to that, there's so much nuance in each of those steps. That's like starting with judgment, right? For instance, how can one even be aware of their own judgment? Like, what does that look like? How do I even define what judgment means for me, right?
Yeah.
What does judgment mean in our communities? What does it mean within myself? Am I judging myself? Is that a piece of it, right? There's just so much there that I love. And what I love about the work of empathy and thinking about it, it's really, in my mind, and I'm a dreamer, utopian guy, it's a reflection of the universe. The universe is messy and weird and incomprehensible at times, and magnificent, right? And so much nuance, and so much that we don't know, and so much that we do know, and all of it made more beauty by curiosity and asking questions and seeking and shedding and changing and transforming every day, right?
Yeah. Yep.
We want to, because of protection, because of the way we were raised, etc., hunker down. We want to build up, right? But really, and of course, we need to protect ourselves at times, and that's part of it. But really, the real work, when we feel safe enough to do so, is to always be shedding, right? Always be dismantling the systems internally and externally, so we can really, truly get to the heart of empathy work. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's my hope is that the 5 steps gives people, as you called it is a framework. It's a starting point.
Yeah.
And so if you're aware that, oh, hey, there might be judgment there, maybe you'll catch yourself, and maybe you'll be able to dismantle it. Maybe you won't cast aspersion on somebody. And then you'll be able to get to those other steps. Is it going to happen all the time? Absolutely not. And when I was writing the book, I was like, I don't want people to think that I'm just this perfect human being, because I am not. I am a work in progress, like everyone. Yep. And I call that out at the beginning and at the end of the book. Like, I still work on this judgment. One thing I say in the book, it's like, my family, judgment is like a dominant gene in my family. We are born brown-eyed and judgy, and that's just how we come out. And you've got to work through that in order to get to empathy. And it does take this metacognition, this just self-awareness of what is about to come out of my mouth, and where is that coming from, and how might that be received by the other person? Yeah. And what are all the things that are layering into that?
I love it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you brought some of your stories into the book. You got a little vulnerable, which I appreciate. Vulnerability connects us. Can you share a little bit of like maybe one of the stories you brought into the book?
Yeah, I mean, the book is kind of like a series of nesting dolls. So at the core are the 5 steps to empathy and just that understanding. But then that is delivered through my own experiences doing marketing research and going into people's homes and hanging out with them for a couple of hours and getting to know them and interviewing them, having conversations. And many times I was challenged with judgment of my own, or I, either did ask a good question and can share where that led to, or I didn't, or when I was actively listening and all of that. So I use my stories from research to bring that to life. But then the kind of big meta arc is my own journey to understanding empathy and using empathy as my superpower. And so the book opens up with my childhood. And I grew up in a pretty small town in Indiana, and my family had moved into that town. And so we were other. And, it was 5th grade, 1980. And the kids pretty quickly figured out that I was not like them. And I knew I wasn't like them, but I didn't have the language, the vocabulary, the awareness of exactly in what way. Because, I was in 5th grade and it was 1980 in Indiana. And so they started to talk. One of the students got the bright idea to tell everybody that I was gay. And that caught on like wildfire. And so I got really good at understanding how to navigate those, the hallways, basically, so that I wouldn't get beaten up, that I could manage the rumors or try to, control it if you could. And empathy became a big part of that. And I write in the book, I mean, I did contemplate suicide when I was in 6th grade. Like the pain was just so great. I'd come home from school in tears, but then hiding it from my parents because I didn't want them to ask me. It was like I knew I was different somehow, and I didn't know how they were going to necessarily respond. And it was even like going to the principal. I couldn't do that because, well, what if he asked me if what the kids were saying was true? And lying is not something that comes naturally to me. So I'd have to be honest and say, well, yeah, I am. And well, then what? Well, then.
So you were out to yourself at that point, but not to others necessarily?
In the idea that there was something different about me. And I kind of had this idea that I'd started hearing, I mean, obviously when the kids were calling me gay, I had to find out, like, Mom, what's gay? And that's really weird as 10, 12 years old, having your mother explain homosexuality to you in that sense. And there was always just something about it where I was like, yeah, that there's something about that I connect to. So I had some understanding that might be where I was, even though I was prepubescent at that point. There were no sexual fantasies then. So I had some understanding of it, and navigating that was really challenging. And I started to use empathy then to get along with the other kids and hear their stories. And by doing that, it's the kind of Dale Carnegie thing of people just like to talk about themselves. So if I could get people to talk about themselves and I could show empathy with them, perhaps when I'm, when a rumor starts or somebody wants to go beat me up or chase me down the hallway or whatever, perhaps they will maybe not come to my rescue, but tamper down the situation or, help me in some way. And so I started using empathy like all throughout that. So it was a challenging childhood for me, particularly in those first few years. So that's kind of the opening of the book and what was going on and how that my Peter Parker spider bite, origin story moment. Yeah. And then the book closes with me going back to my 30th high school reunion. And because I was able to use empathy and, at that point, I was already writing the book and was thinking about these things. And I noticed my classmates were sharing their stories and their experiences from their childhood. And I was hearing things that I didn't know of, where, the emotional abuse from a parent, the drinking, all the different things, the mental health issues that were happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it just dawned on me. I was like, oh my God, we are all just wounded animals. Like, we were just bumping into each other. This had nothing to do with me. This was about that. Like, they were hurt, and it doesn't excuse what they did, but I was able to have forgiveness and reach forgiveness because I had empathy. I understood what was going on for them finally.
Mm.
And that was a big turning point for me in my own kind of healing process, and kind of coming to terms with what I'd been going through in my life.
Mm. I love that. And thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry you had a tough time. That makes sense. 1980, rural Indiana. That makes sense. That feels tough. And I've heard from others who have had maybe similar experiences, this sort of finding protection in trying to befriend everyone, right? Mm-hmm. Which is so fascinating. It's like such a interesting, like, trauma response. Like, let's make everyone like me, which is, and the same is true of everyone else, right? They're all trying to figure it out, and middle school is just so hard and can be brutal. I'm grateful that you got out of it, not out of it, but I'm grateful you found some insight and you were able to give, yourself a little bit of grace and even them a little bit of perspective. Because one can move on from that and feel fuck them, right? Like, and that would be understandable, right?
Yeah. And it's just last week we were having we do every other Friday, we do what we call coffee talk. And so 45 minutes, everybody in the company comes together and we talk about everything other than work. And the day before, 2 employees who are both based in Minneapolis, they sent around a photo. They realized that they were in the same community ice skating review back when they were like 10 years old or something. And there's so we were all trying to guess who they were or whatever. And so we got on, and I said, hey, come to coffee talk and we'll talk about this and find out who is who. So we're having the coffee talk and they're talking about it. And I'm having flashbacks to, oh yeah, when I was in soccer and tried to do soccer in this small town. And the coach, who was my pediatrician, had me on the bench the whole time. And playing soccer in Indiana in October, it's cold, it's wet, and sitting on the bench is not what you want to be doing. You want to be running around.
Yeah.
And I started to talk about that, and I had some bowling memory that I brought up. And one of my colleagues was like, oh, I had these awesome experiences, in different programs in athletics when she was a child. And I was like, oh, wow. Not everybody had those traumatic sorts of experiences. That was kind of unique to me. And my husband, who works at the company, was, and we talked about it afterward, and I know he's had those same sort of traumas, but not everybody has lived that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a moment of me realizing oh, I can't make that assumption. I can't have judgment about that. I need to have empathy with hey, some people did have, or that part of their childhood was positive and a good experience. They've had other wounds maybe, and that mine was different. And so the way that you come together and engage with each other, you can't just assume everybody grew up exactly like you. Everybody had a bucolic childhood. Everybody had that picture perfect thing. No.
Yeah.
And it's different for everyone, the experiences that we have.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And it's interesting, when you're kids, you're really just trying to survive, all of us, right? And so when you are in that space, it can be very kind of narrow, and you're not maybe, I guess what I'm reflecting on is do you think about, or do you talk to kids about this stuff, right? Because I feel like this stuff has to happen like much sooner than, I'm in my early 40s.
I'm in my early 50s.
You're a human in his early 50s. I've been working with this stuff the last few years. You have been, studying this stuff. But like empathy wasn't a concept I was even aware of. Like, I knew the word, but like it was never something that I would find in a text in a classroom, right? Or anything like that. And I'm grateful that we're talking about it more, but like, I'm hoping that either through your work, the book, the workshops I guess the question is, do you go into classrooms?
Yeah, I do. I've been speaking more at the university level to college students so far.
Same.
I've been getting, as the book has come out, I have had educators at the high school level reaching out and saying like, wow, this is, would this be appropriate for high school, boys or whomever?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that it is, but I'm not an educator. And I always say like, I am not an educator, so I don't know enough to say, oh yeah, and use it this way.
Yeah.
But I am interested in exploring that. But when I talk to college students about it, and you probably find the same thing, they need it. They're hungry for it because they're figuring out at that transition point in their life, like how they want to show up in the world. Mm-hmm. And they've already decided they want to show up differently than older generations. And they're looking for the tools in how to actually behave and be and exist with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a scary time for a lot of people. And for many people, it's the first time that they're on their own. Right. And so creating that or trying to find that identity piece can be super scary, just terrifying. And if you're not being taught the tools to relate and to examine our biases and assumptions and things, it's going to be harder. Yeah. No, I know that the stuff that I've done in college classrooms has been very helpful and I've heard, wonderful things, and I'd like to get into, doing workshops in high schools, even trying to elementary school. Like I feel like this stuff can be taught even earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of how do we break down these very complex concepts, and starting with some basics, right? Some basic ways to do that. And I've seen it done. I've done research and I've seen there's ways to do it. It's just, it takes time and effort and energy like anything worth doing. Yeah.
And it's one heart at a time, one conversation at a time. So,
yeah. How has your interest in empathy and sort of, you have this thing called Empathy Camp, which I'm endlessly fascinated by, and you lead workshops. Like, how has this work impacted your own relationship with your partner?
Well, there's the time away from my partner, and the conflicting kind of, I need this done, help, piece of it. But my husband is incredibly empathetic. He's a highly sensitive person. So it's interesting for him protecting himself. He does that with judgment. And so that's an interesting kind of dynamic to see play out. And I certainly am not going to be you shouldn't be, you should have empathy here, because he knows. But I try to show up that way. But I have, over the years and through my own journey of self-discovery and awareness and therapy and intuitive healers and all of that, I think the way we engage has grown, and the way we see each other. And I I do use empathy and to reflect back that I am listening, and that I'm hearing what he's saying and connecting. It's so challenging with your spouses because, you're around them more than anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It is hard, right? Like, you're around them more than anyone, and you know them the most, and at least I'll speak for me. I know Jessica more than anyone, right? And I know her background, and I know the things that light her up and the things that frustrate her, and so sometimes like holding all of that can be hard in the context of empathy, in terms of connection and doing it in a way that's useful and helpful. But I would say for sure that me sort of thinking about this stuff has helped me be a better listener, right? Has helped me, I think 10 years ago, I wouldn't have had the capacity for it. I wouldn't have been able to, like, I might have been more angry in moments or frustrated in moments, where now I can, not always, but take pause and step back and listen and understand that it's not about me, or things like that are really helpful in relationship with anyone.
Yeah. And actually one other thing with my husband, Charles, both of his parents have read the book now, and they're in their early 90s. And there's their relationship has been challenged, over the years, and not necessarily feeling seen by them. But now that they've actually read the book, it's changed the way they're interacting with him. They're actually like asking him questions and listening to answers, and just have greater awareness of how they're sort of showing up. And they're 91 years old. That's pretty amazing to me.
That is amazing.
Yeah. And so I think there's some, there is some good that's coming out of it. And that's certainly helped us. But yeah, something that you said, it's like when you know so much about that other person, I mean, that's a lot. Like that can be used for good, and that can be used for not so good. And, so the buttons to press, or the buttons to press to relieve the pressure. And it's great responsibility that goes along with that. And there's so much trust that's there as well.
Yeah. Well, and that's another component of empathy that I think is crucial is safety, right?
Yeah.
We're going to have our guard up. We're going to have our barriers up or armor if we don't feel safe, right? And so, part of it is coming up with a mutually agreed upon definition of safety for each other, for our communities, for our partnerships, for our friends.
Yeah.
Right? Do you think about safety? What that means?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I think if I'm thinking about like emotional safety or feeling safe to be vulnerable, which to me that's emotional safety. I don't know when I started doing this, but I've always been pretty open about my life, because I've found that when you keep secrets, that gives somebody power over you if they know your secret. And if I don't want others, so if I'm just tell you like it is, then you're not going to be able to you can't have that power dynamic over me. So to me, and there are probably things that are levels of privacy or degrees of privacy, of course, but generally, by my sharing something, actually it might help you open up about something that you're going through, or just seeing me for who I am and accepting me, and then not letting you have that power over me. And keeping that dynamic in balance, I guess. But I've always found it was interesting when I set out to write the book, like I didn't want to write something that was going to be really didactic and like, you must do this to be empathetic, because I've just always found like that's not how people listen to me. They listen when I tell stories and when I talk about my own experiences and when I share, and then they learn something from that. And I think that's probably how most of us learn generally. And so I wanted to try to have that approach in the book, and I think I achieved that. But it's an interesting topic of safety.
Yeah, it is. I think I've been thinking about it a lot lately, because I lead these monthly emotional check-ins with Feely Human, and it's, I have to come into that and understand that we all have maybe a different definition of what that means, right? And we all bring our individual experiences, right? I'm coming to the fold as a white cis, man of privilege, right? Who's had experiences with anorexia or childhood trauma. I have clinical depression, things like that. Like, these are all sort of like pieces of the fabric or the quilt, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes they inform, sometimes they don't. But like bringing, I think the work is like bringing all of that and bringing awareness to all of it, and being open to the person's wholeness is kind of part of that, and getting into that for each of us, and determining within that intersectionality, like what safety means. Because if I say one tenet of my safety is for us to assume positive intent, that doesn't necessarily mean the other person's going to have that as part of their definition, right? I mean, probably, but hopefully. I mean, that might have been a bad example, but you know what I mean? I think I think the work of empathy is in understanding that we all have, yes, universal connective human experience, and all very different and all very valid, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know. I think about it often.
Well, and it's, I realized as you were talking, and I was thinking about safety, and I was like, oh, I know where my truth to power comes from. Because effectively what was happening when I was a kid was I had a secret that I didn't totally understand what the secret was, but the other kids had figured it out, and they were like making my life a living hell as a result of it. So I wouldn't say I have an aversion to secrets, certainly, but I've seen the negative effect of them. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's like, yeah, I'm a gay man, and so what? Like, how is that affecting your life?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was interesting before you were talking about safety. The way that you framed it was like, it felt to me like almost like I'm going to get ahead of this before you do. Like I'm one-upping you in a way, which is interesting. That's like a protective measure. Yeah.
I think that's very astute of you. That is probably true. You can't, you're not going to hold anything over me because I'm going to just tell you what it is ahead of time.
Yeah. I feel you.
I found I think he'll be okay with me talking about this. My husband was going through an episode 15 years ago with depression and anxiety, and he was going through a graduate program. And he needed to withdraw from some classes. And I was encouraging it. Oprah was on at the time, and her show was kind of encouraging that, of like, just own your truth, speak your truth, and you'll be surprised at what can happen from that. And he went to the dean of the program, and he was honest with her about what was going on. And she was incredibly supportive, and even opened up about her own struggles with depression and mental health issues and things she was going through. And similarly, a couple of his classmates, he shared what was happening, and heard very similar sorts of stories that you wouldn't have known otherwise. And so it became a very good experience for him to step back and do the self-care before he re-engaged with the program. And it probably felt good for them to also know that kind of connectedness and that sharing. And so again, it's like there's no shame. Don't be ashamed of it. Just own it and be honest about it. And, you know, I suppose like my brain goes to all the different things somebody could be ashamed of. And there are some things where restitution is needed or whatever, but own it and try to move through it.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to take a quick pause because my puppy is... So I'd love to hear, I recently, like just a few days ago, Rob, I lost my job, my day job.
Oh, okay.
I'm out of a day job for the first time in 7 years. It feels weird and scary and maybe hopeful. But the experience of it, I won't get into details yet. It's still a little raw, but it felt dehumanizing. It felt like deeply lacking in empathy, the process of it. And I wonder for you, what does empathy at work look like to you? Like how can leaders and employees and peers like do better at empathy in the context of work?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that happened to you.
Thank you.
You know, I've been laid off a couple times in my career, and they ultimately led to much, much better things. So, but it's hard to see that in the moment as you're wrestling with all the what the hell, why me?
For sure.
Shake my fist. I'm never buying your product again.
Fuck the man.
Exactly. But it's a big challenge right now that organizations are finally facing the need to be more empathetic in their engagements with their employees. And one study that came out last summer found that like 90% of Gen Z have indicated they'll stay at an employer that's more empathetic. Like there's a lot of loyalty. And yet another study found that only 1 in 4 employees found that the empathy levels in their organization are sufficient. So there's a real like gap for us to overcome. What I counsel, and letting people go is, I've had to do it myself, and it is traumatic. It's traumatic on the person it's happening to. It's generally hard for the manager or whoever has to do that, no matter how stone-faced they might be or whatever. But there are ways to be more empathetic and, you know, respectful, I think, in the way that the message is being delivered. In the, you know, the organization probably needs to do it to survive, because whatever might be going on in that particular moment. Yeah. But you're still affecting an individual's livelihood, their sense of self-worth. And so how do you make them feel supported in that separation process, and using more empathetic language, you know, and there is just so much shock that happens in that, you know, the wait, what? I didn't see that coming. So on a daily basis, though, for an organization, so there's in that moment, and how do you, you know, part ways with somebody with grace and dignity that leaves everybody somewhat intact rather than tattered. On a day-to-day basis, it's really about people taking the time to listen to each other and not just talk about work. Like, you got time for that. Like, let's talk about the real stuff. Like, what are you watching on Netflix? How do you feel about that? Let's, you know, connect. Let's talk about Ukraine, because, oh my God. Yeah. And taking the time to connect on that level as people, rather than this, like, you know, Orwellian sort of vision of us all as automatons working, you know, the focus on productivity and do make things happen, because that's not who we are. We're people, and we show up as people. And, one of the things that's come out of the pandemic is this understanding, a greater understanding of, yeah, we are all people and we've got things going on and we need to have the space to deal with that. So if you're a manager, take the time to ask the questions. If you've got a 30-minute update with your employee, take the first 10 or 15 minutes and just shoot the shit. Talk about whatever's happening and be vulnerable, be open about yourself and what you're going through.
Yeah.
It's not showing weakness. It's actually, and that's the thing. It's like, if we can change the perception of vulnerability, which by the nature of the word and how it gets used is seen as weakness.
Yeah.
What's their vulnerable spot? Where's the weakness? But it's actually a strength, and as we were talking earlier about secrets and my share, there's power in being vulnerable. And so how do you start to look at things that way and start to move through the world that way? How do you start to ask different questions? So instead of saying like, why were you late to work today? Why was that report late? Whatever the situation is, it's like, what's going on? Tell me about what happened with that report. That's taking a question. You need to understand why the report was late or why the employee showed up late or whatever. But instead of attacking them using that pointed why word, you're using other ways to let them open up and share what's going on. Tell me more about that. It's a really easy way. Tell me more about what was going on with that report.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about what's happening. Tell me about that kid doing cartwheels in your background,
I love that. There's less assumption in that versus the why question is there's an assumed negative in there. There's assumed you did wrong, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's not trying to get to a positive outcome. It's assigning blame. And, why is such a loaded word for all of us, because from the time we were, 3 years old, we were asked why. Why did you draw on the wall with crayon? Why did you cut your sister's hair?
I drew on the wall.
Yeah.
I remember in kindergarten drawing on the wall, I got a black mark. Like there was like a physical like paper like black mark.
Wow. Yeah,
I know.
And so we get asked why so many times throughout, and it's always because we've done something wrong. So when or perceived something wrong.
Yeah.
And so, now like when you ask me why, it's like, oh, I want to dodge that. Like, I feel uncomfortable. I don't want to answer that. Versus if you would say to me, tell me what's going on about what are you feeling with, how is that affecting you? Like there's so many ways. And then, English is such a wonderful language and, so many different ways of asking why without using the word why.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And do you, with Ignite 360, do you do this work in businesses? Do you talk about this stuff? Oh, great.
So that empathy camp that you mentioned is a training program that we offer. And, everything that we do is very bespoke. So clients come to us with a challenge, a situation, and then we develop a program, whether it's a research program or a training program that fits their needs and their situations. And sometimes we'll wrap empathy training in consumer engagement. So you're meeting with your customer and you're interacting with them as a kind of capstone to an empathy training course. Other times it's a little bit more presenting and telling stories and having people work through things in small groups. But empathy, it's used in so many things in our lives, and so many skills have empathy as a foundation to it. So if you're able to use empathy to be a better communicator, a better collaborator, be more persuasive at work, to come up with better ideas, that's going to make you a better employee, manager, leader, person, parent, partner, spouse, all the things.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose like the way that we need to sell it is like, yes, it'll make your employees more productive or more happy, right? And that is true. I think that's true.
It is.
And inlaid in there is it will also bring more nuance emotionally and a deeper understanding of self and a deeper understanding of our collective connection and our collective connection and intent and impact and how we show up in the world. All of that hopefully sort of comes sort of under the surface as sort of like the Trojan horse of sorts.
Yeah, it is. And by doing that, you are creating, as I said, 90% of Gen Z want to stay at companies that are more empathetic. People with more, there's other data out there from last year where people that have more empathetic managers, they navigate work-life balance better than people that don't have empathetic leaders. They are more likely to stay at an organization. People of color are more likely to stay at an organization where they feel like there is empathy in the organization and in their leadership. So by taking the time to have those connections, to make those connections, you're actually creating a more loyal workforce, a more dedicated workforce, and ultimately then a more productive workforce, which is ultimately what a business is looking for. And they're hopefully going to be happier as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that just benefits everybody then.
Yeah. I love that. And I appreciate that you do that work in businesses. It's crucial.
It is.
Yeah. I love it.
And all of the people that you might talk to that are on an individual level, they show up at work too.
Yeah.
So, it's that 360 of who we are as humans. And that's why, empathy is important at work and at home, in all aspects of our life.
Yep. It's not a checkbox. It's not a one dimension. It's a everyday, ongoing, messy, and active. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%. 360. I like that. Now I get it. Ignite 360. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
I got to it. So let's talk about empathy heroes, Rob. This is the part of the show where you and I mention someone in our lives, could even be a character from a story we love or a movie, someone who is one of our empathy heroes, who embodies empathy and compassion and hope. I will go first to give you a moment to reflect on your empathy hero. So when this episode comes out, dear listeners, it will be the third week of maybe the last week in April. And I wanted to just say that my empathy hero is, maybe this is self-serving, but I don't care. My empathy hero is my new journal, Dear Childhood Me, which came out April 4th and is closing its sale May 4th. This is a project I've been working on for the past year, conceived of it 2 years ago, and it's finally here, and I'm selling it, and I'm very proud of it, and I think it will help a lot of people connect to their inner child, give your inner child a lot of love and attention and nourishment. And I'm very proud of it. And so if you're listening to this now, please, if you haven't ordered one, go order 10, 20, even 100 if you're a business and you want some. I have bulk options too. Go to dearchildhoodme.com. That's dearchildhoodme.com. That's just a self-promo thing that I'm inserting into my Empathy Hero segment. How about you, Rob?
As you should. The first thing that came to my mind, there's so many people that have inspired me with empathy, but I'm going to actually say Wonder Woman.
Nice.
Because she is all about truth and compassion and love. And those values line up really kind of straight on with what I'm all about. Mm-hmm. And I think that was something that kept me, I grew up in the period of Linda Carter as Wonder Woman back in the day. Mm-hmm. And that, gave me hope and a sense of, we can make a better world out there.
Great one. It's a great empathy hero. I don't know if Wonder Woman has been said. I think Spider-Man has been said, but no one from the DC universe. So good on you.
There you go. I'm representing DCU.
There you go. There you go. I love it.
And I will say Gal Gadot has done an amazing job of, and that is what has made her successful, is she's captured that essence, which is what Linda Carter captured, I believe. It's like that essence of that character and that compassion and the truth and the love of humanity.
Yeah. I really love that first Wonder Woman with Gal Gadot. It was great.
Yeah.
The second one, not so much. I feel like it was a bit messy, but I think she's great as Wonder Woman for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The first one is, you'll never replicate her running across that battlefield. Like just that moment that is everything. And you can't have that in the second movie. I was very happy with the second movie, but is it perfect? No. But I enjoyed it. It was Wonder Woman, you know, and so I was happy. That was a wonderful Christmas for me.
Nice. Well, Rob, where can the listeners out there order your book, connect with you, learn more about all the wonderful work you're doing in the world?
Thank you. Yes. So the book is available wherever books are sold, where you buy books. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Bookshop, indieshop.org, or Indie Books. So your local bookseller, wherever you buy, it's available in hardcover as well as on ebook. There is an audiobook that will be coming out in May. I don't have that exact date, but it is coming in May. So they can find the book. You can find me. You can go to 5stepstoempathy.com. That's the number 5, stepstoempathy.com. And then, of course, on social media, on Instagram, I'm empathy _activist. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you just search Rob Volpe, empathy activist, I will show up. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter at rmvolpe.com or rmvolpe. I even have a TikTok that I've not done too much with yet, but I have an idea.
There you go. As long as you have one idea.
And Peloton too. High five me if you're a Peloton.
Oh wow, you're on all the places. You're everywhere, Rob.
Absolutely.
I'm only on Instagram.
One conversation at a time.
There you go. One conversation at a time. Yeah, that's achievable. That's doable. Well, thank you for being a part of You Me Empathy. I appreciate. I'm grateful that this book exists. I'm happy for folks to read it and order it. Bookshop.org is a great resource. So listeners, all of those links will be in the show notes at feelyhuman.co. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. This has been a refreshing and wonderful conversation.
Agreed. And to you listeners, as I always say, I'm here, you're here, we're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring, pale blue dot. We have each other. It's you, me, empathy.
La, la, la.